She stepped off the train with a letter folded 8 times in her gloved palm. The ink had faded where her thumb kept pressing the same words over and over again. We await you with open hearts. The children are eager to meet their new ma. No signature, just initials. Sir. She whispered them to herself like a secret hymn, trying to calm the drumbeat of fear behind her ribs. The station was little more than a crooked platform and a rusted bench. No banners. No warm welcomes. Just the dry wind and a hunched man sweeping ash into a barrel. She clutched her valise, cracked leather, handle mended with twine, and took her first step onto the new soil she hoped would become home. The widower was meant to meet her here. She scanned the horizon. A buckboard wagon stood by the post office, its horses pawing nervously at the dirt. Beside it, 2 children waited. A girl, maybe 6, with sun-blonde braids and a stuffed cloth rabbit. A boy, a few years older, stood behind her, jaw tight, eyes sharp. And there, him. Broad-shouldered, dressed in worn denim and a black duster. He didn't smile. She lifted a hand. Waved. He didn't wave back. But he approached. You're her? He asked, voice low. Not cruel. Not kind. I'm the one who wrote you, she said softly. From Virginia. The train ran 2 days late. I'm sorry. You didn't say in your letters that you couldn't bear children. The world slowed. She didn't know how to answer. Not fast enough. The words tangled in her throat like thread snagged on a splinter. I thought, she began. You should have said it plain. His son shifted beside him. The girl looked up, confused. It was in my second letter, she managed, voice smaller than she meant. After the fever. I said I wasn't sure. He looked away, back toward the wagon. I need someone who can give them more than silence. I can give them steadiness, she said, reaching for courage she hadn't needed in years. Kindness. A home. I already had that, he said. Then, good day. He turned, walked to the wagon. The boy followed. The girl hesitated. She stared at the woman, eyes wide, then took 2 small steps closer before the boy snapped at her. Come on, Ruth. The girl looked back once more before climbing up beside her brother. They left her standing in the dust, her bonnet catching the wind. She didn't cry. Not in front of the station keeper. Not with the taste of iron in her mouth. Instead, she stepped toward the boarding house. The paint peeled. The roof sagged. A woman in a faded dress leaned against the porch post, arms crossed. You're the one who was sent for, the woman said flatly. Guess it didn't take. She didn't answer. The landlady's eyes flicked to her suitcase. Room's $1 a week. Pay Sunday. We don't do charity. I'll pay, the woman replied. Her name was never spoken. Not yet. Names came with welcome. And there had been none. The room was small. 1 window. A narrow bed with a quilt someone had abandoned mid-stitch. She set down the wooden horse she had carved for the boy. Set it on the dresser like it might still matter. The nights were cold. Not from weather, but silence. She dreamed of voices, only to wake to the creak of the roof and her own shallow breath. By the 3rd day, whispers followed her like wind through a broken fence. Infertile, they muttered. Misled him. Poor man, already grieving, now that. She came all this way. Imagine the shame. But no one said it to her face. She carried her shoulders high. Bought thread and bread with coin folded in a handkerchief. Offered to help the seamstress on Main Street for no pay. Only until I prove myself useful, she said. The seamstress, a gray-eyed widow named Miss Hetty, studied her long before nodding. She spent days bent over fabric, fingers bleeding from 2 tight stitches. But each one steadied her. Each one proved she still had value, even if no one came to see it. Until one morning, while folding aprons, she heard a knock. Unsure. She opened the door to find the little girl, Ruth, clutching a bouquet of thistles and wild poppies. These are for you, the girl said. "Thank you," she replied, stunned. "I told Pa you were pretty," Ruth added. Before she could reply, the boy appeared at the gate. "You're not supposed to talk to her." Ruth frowned. "But she's nice." "She's not our ma," the boy said, then turned and walked away. Ruth lingered, uncertain, before following. The woman didn't cry. She set the flowers in a chipped glass of water, put them by the carved horse. Later that week, at the church social, no one invited her to sit. She stood beneath the sycamore, hands clasped, listening to laughter she wasn't part of. From across the field, she saw the widower watching her. Not cold this time, but not open either. Something unreadable. She didn't look away. A storm came early that year. Rain that howled like sorrow. She walked the long mile from church alone, shawl pulled tight, shoes sinking into mud. And when she reached the boarding house porch, something strange sat beside her door. A bundle, wrapped in oilskin. Inside, a tin of salve, a bar of handmade soap, and a scrap of woolen cloth. No note. She touched the wool, recognized it from the boy's jacket, one she'd mended for Miss Hetty just the day before. The next morning, she found another gift. A child's button. Shiny. Useless. Placed gently on the sill outside her window. Then came the knock. She opened the door expecting the landlady. Instead, the widower. He looked uncomfortable. Held a shirt in his hands. "It's torn," he said. "I can pay for your time." "You don't have to," she said quietly, reaching for it. "It's only fair." Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. That night, she stitched in silence. Not just the shirt, but herself. Rewoven, thread by thread. In the morning, she returned it to him at the mercantile. He took it, nodded once, and said something she hadn't expected to hear. "Thank you." The next Sunday, Ruth sat beside her in church. And the boy, this time, didn't object. Later that afternoon, Ruth ran to her room without knocking, arms full of wildflowers. "These are for the shelf," the girl said. "For your horse." The woman smiled. Just a little. But when she placed the flowers beside the carved horse, she whispered something she hadn't said since she'd left Virginia. Maybe, just maybe. The days lengthened. The town still whispered, but softer now, and sometimes they even smiled. When the girl tripped in the dirt, it was the woman who bandaged her knee. When the boy broke a buckle, it was the woman who mended it. The widower began to stop by, once to bring eggs, another time to borrow sugar. Each visit ended with silence, but not the cold kind. The kind that holds space for something that hasn't been spoken yet. One evening, she heard boots outside her door. She opened it without knocking. It was him. He didn't say anything, just handed her a package. Inside, a small spool of blue thread. She looked up, and for the first time, he wasn't looking through her. He was looking at her. Like maybe, she wasn't just the woman who couldn't bear children. Maybe she was someone who had something no one else could give. And though he didn't say it, she felt it. It settled between them like rain on dry land. Later, when the children visited, Ruth climbed onto her lap and asked, "Do you miss having babies of your own?" She didn't know how to answer, but the girl answered for her. "That's okay. I can be yours." And the boy, standing in the doorway, arms crossed, didn't argue. That night, as the candle burned low and the wind sang against the panes, she held the carved horse in her hands, traced the grain, the little wooden tail, then placed it, not on the dresser, but in the center of the room, like a promise, like a beginning. And for the first time since she'd stepped off the train, she whispered into the quiet, "I think I'm home." The whispers did not fade. They only changed their shape. At first, it was her name they avoided. Then it was her shadow they crossed the street to miss. The boarding house grew colder that winter, not from wind but from silence. The landlady no longer greeted her in the mornings. Church pews filled, but not beside her. When she placed her gloves on the hymnal, they were politely moved. She had not been thrown out, but she was being quietly erased. She still walked to town, back straight, hands tucked into her worn shawl. She offered no complaints. She kept her chin high even as the wind stung her cheeks red. She became a ghost with a pulse. But ghosts remember everything. Each insult wrapped in false kindness. Each neighbor who smiled with their mouth and not their eyes. She began to move around them, not with fear, but with quiet precision. She took in mending, wordlessly, always finished early, stitches so fine they looked woven. She sold dried herbs to the general store, sewed pockets for schoolboys too ashamed to ask, brought pies to sick women, always left without staying long. And when no one hired her to cook, she brought food anyway, to the church, to the widow who lost her sight, to the midwife with crooked knees. Always something warm, always seasoned with grace. But nothing softened the boy's silence. He no longer scowled, but he did not speak. He watched, measured her, waited for her to leave again. The girl, Ruth, clung tighter. She brought her pine cones, shiny rocks, and a small tin whistle. She began calling her Miss, then Missy, and finally, softly, Mama. The woman never corrected her. But she never answered to it either. One morning, while collecting eggs for the widow who'd gone ill, she passed the boy alone by the barn. His hands were scraped, his lip bloodied. She stopped. He kept his head down. "What happened?" she asked gently. "Nothin'," he muttered. "You're bleeding." I said it's nothin'. She didn't press. Just offered the corner of her shawl, already frayed and patched. He didn't take it. But he didn't walk away either. So she left it on the fence post beside him and moved on. That night, the shawl returned to her door, folded with the blood washed out. She didn't know if it was the boy or the widower who'd done it, and that not knowing made her ache. The town's butcher was the first to stop her. A large man with a thick mustache and suspicious eyes. "You workin' for the Cartwrights?" he asked as she passed his shop. "No," she replied simply. "You keep showing up there," he said, arms crossed. "That man didn't marry you." "I know." He leaned closer. "You think you're gonna shame him into it? Make folks feel sorry?" She met his eyes. "No," she said. "I'm not here for pity. I'm here for the children." He didn't respond, just snorted and turned back inside. The next day, no one bought her pies at the market. The day after, her mending was refused. Still, she carried on. Not out of pride, but necessity. Because some people, women especially, know that silence and kindness can be the sharpest forms of survival. One night, Ruth fell ill. A fever that burned her cheeks and made her sob through dreams. The widower came to her room, face pale, hands trembling. "Please," he said, without greeting. "She's a skin for you." She didn't bring judgment. Only a cool cloth, a jar of willow bark tea, and a steady voice. She sat beside the girl all night, wiping sweat, whispering lullabies. When dawn came, the girl's fever broke, and the woman collapsed into the chair, exhausted. The boy brought her tea. Without speaking, the widower lingered in the doorway. "You didn't have to come," he said softly. She looked up. "You didn't have to ask." He nodded once, and left the door open behind him. After that, no one questioned why she came and went from their house. But the whispers returned in a darker shape. That she was a temptress. That she bewitched the children. That a woman with no womb would surely find other ways to steal a man's heart. Miss Hetty warned her, quietly, one morning, while folding linens. "You're not doing anything wrong," she said. "But folks here don't care about that. They care about stories that sound clean." The woman nodded. "I've never been clean to them." "Then be steady," Hetty said. "Let them run out of breath." She took that advice to heart. She didn't defend herself, didn't withdraw, but she changed. She wore her hair pinned higher, Her dresses were always modest. She never stayed past dusk. But one afternoon, while walking back from the Cartwrights, she was cornered by the preacher's wife. "Forgive me," the woman said, voice sugar-laced, "but some of us are concerned. The children grow too attached. If you leave—" She didn't finish. The woman replied, "Then maybe someone should ask why they weren't held tighter before." The preacher's wife blanched, but said no more. Still, after that, doors closed more often. Invitations stopped. The town had decided again. She was not one of them. But the children didn't care. They came daily, with chores, questions, bruises, joys. The boy began calling her ma'am. Never ma, but never cold. He once brought her a book of birds. "You read a lot," he muttered. "Figured you'd like it." She thanked him with a smile. He looked away, cheeks red. And then came the accident. Ruth fell from a fence rail, twisted her ankle bad. The doctor said she'd walk, but not soon. For now she'd need help and time. The widower didn't know what to do. She stepped forward. "I'll stay with her. I can move into the spare room, just until she walks again." He hesitated, then nodded. "You'll have your own key." That night she moved in. Not as a wife. Not as anything clear. The boy watched her from the stairs, saying nothing. But when she passed him a quilt, he took it without protest. The days passed slowly. She read to Ruth, braided her hair, helped her write silly poems. She stitched new curtains for the girls' room, blue ones, the color of sky after rain. The widower returned home each evening more tired, but also more at peace. One night, she left a stew simmering on the stove. He said, "It smells like home." She paused, then asked, "Do you miss her?" He didn't answer right away. Finally, "Every day. But it's starting to feel different now." And then, a week later, the letter came. A woman in town, a cousin of the widower, had written back east, to the family who'd sent her, claiming deceit, fraud, that the woman came under false pretenses, that she was trying to force her way into a family by emotional manipulation. The letter was signed and sealed. A copy sent to the sheriff's office. They said nothing would come of it. But everyone in town heard. Everyone whispered. She stayed in her room that night, hands folded, the carved horse in her lap. The boy came to her door. "Is it true?" he asked. She shook her head. "I never lied. I just hoped." He looked down, then said, "People lie a lot in this town." Then, "But you don't." He left before she could answer. The next morning, the widower confronted the cousin. In public, in front of the general store. Said his children were better since she came. Said she'd never once asked for anything. That anyone who hurt her would answer to him. And that night, for the first time, he knocked on her door not with something broken, but with something whole. A pie. Peach. Her favorite. "Ruth helped me bake it," he said. "She told me." "You're not just here for them," he said. "You're here for us." She didn't answer, but she opened the door wider, and he stepped in. The morning after he stepped inside her room with the peach pie, she rose before the sun, unsure if anything had truly changed or if it had all been a kindness delivered too late. She lit the stove, swept the floor, and pressed her fingers to the window pane where frost kissed the corners. Still, her breath fogged the glass. Still, her hands trembled. Downstairs, the house was hushed. But something new hung in the air. Not silence. Something softer, like music heard just beyond the walls. He greeted her with a quiet nod. Nothing more. But his shirt was neatly buttoned, the one she had mended. And the children, for the first time, ate breakfast without tension. No one mentioned the pie. Later, while folding laundry by the hearth, she found a small daisy tucked into her apron pocket. It had browned at the edges, but the center still held yellow. She did not ask who placed it there. She simply kept it between the pages of the bird book the boy had given her. The days passed gently, with no sudden declarations, no dramatic turns. Just moments. She read aloud in the evenings while Ruth sketched animals on scraps of paper. The boy, now less wary, occasionally sat beside them, not close, but not distant either. One evening, while she peeled apples for a tart, the widower brought her a book. A collection of poems. "I found this in the attic," he said. "Figured it'd suit you better." She took it carefully. "Thank you." He didn't leave right away. "Do you like it here?" he asked after a beat. She glanced up. "I like them." "I asked if you liked here." She paused. "I think I could." That night, she read from the book by lamplight. The poem was about a bridge, built slowly, stone by stone, across a river no one thought could be crossed. The next day, the boy asked her if she'd ever fished. She smiled. "Not well." He handed her a carved rod. "Then you oughta learn." She did. Badly. But she laughed more that day than she had in months. He didn't smile, not exactly. But he said, "You're not useless." She blinked. "I never thought I was." "Good," he said, walking away. "'Cause I used to." At supper, the girl told a joke. The widower laughed. His eyes crinkled in a way that made her chest ache. She washed the dishes with a quiet song on her lips. Then came the note. Left on her pillow, folded neatly, no name signed. "I don't know when it happened, but you feel like the part of the house we forgot we needed." She traced the words over and over. The next morning, she asked him directly, "Was it you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he poured her coffee and asked if she'd join him on the porch. The wind was gentle. Birds sang low. He said, "The children trust you. That's no small thing." She nodded. He continued, "And you never asked for anything." "I didn't come to take. I came to give." "I know," he said, voice hoarse. "But I want to offer something now." She turned to face him. "Time," he said. "Just that. No promises. No rush. Just time." She exhaled. Slowly. "I'd like that." The rhythm of the house shifted. She moved through it with lighter steps. Her hands became part of its heartbeat, dusting shelves, mending curtains, tying Ruth's hair with soft ribbons. The boy grew taller. He began to say her name when calling her. Not Mississippi, her name. And it always made her pause. One night, the widower returned home later than usual. He was bruised, not badly, but enough to startle her. "Disagreement at the cattle auction," he said. "Nothing worth repeating." She touched his cheek gently. Just once. He closed his eyes. And when he opened them, she was still there. "You're not scared of much," he said. "I've already lost everything once. What else is there to fear?" That night, he left a pair of gloves on her chair. Warmer ones. Lined with wool. The next morning, she placed a tin of balm by his boots. Neither mentioned the exchange. On the first snow, she took Ruth outside. They built a crooked snowman, dressed him in one of the boy's old scarves. The boy grumbled, but didn't stop them. Later, by the fire, she taught them a song from her childhood. They sang it poorly, but laughed through the tune. The widower watched from the doorway, leaning against the frame. No words. Just eyes soft as melting ice. She caught his gaze. And for the first time, he didn't look away. A week later, while mending a sleeve, she found a note in the pocket. The same handwriting. "I don't think I could imagine this house without you anymore." This time, she didn't ask. She simply left a ribbon, pale green, on his coat hook. Her answer. Then came the afternoon when the boy fell ill. Fevered, coughing, restless. She stayed by his side, cooling his brow, changing linens, humming the same lullaby she'd sung to Ruth. The widower stayed close but didn't interfere. At dawn, the boy stirred. "You stayed." "I did." "Why?" Because you matter. He swallowed. You smell like lavender. Like my ma used to. She didn't speak, but he reached for her hand. Later, when he recovered, he handed her a small piece of paper. On it, the words, "Thank you, Ma." He didn't say it aloud. But he didn't need to. That evening, she wept for the first time in months. In the dark, he knocked. He didn't say anything. Just sat beside her. They didn't touch. They didn't move. But the silence between them felt different now. Not heavy. Not full of things unsaid. Just full. "I've never met someone like you," he whispered. She turned. "That's because I've never let anyone stay long enough." He nodded. "You're brave." "I'm tired of being brave." "You can rest now." "I don't know how." "I'll learn with you." The fire popped. Outside, snow fell. Inside, the world shifted. She leaned her head on his shoulder. He didn't flinch. The next morning, the children found them still there, seated close, eyes closed. They didn't tease. They just smiled. That night, as she tucked Ruth in, the girl whispered, "Are you going to be our new mama?" She paused. "Would you want that?" Ruth nodded. "You already feel like one." The boy added from the doorway, "It's about time Pa noticed." She blinked. The children giggled. She looked toward the stairs. He stood at the top, watching, waiting. She smiled, and walked toward him. The town's harvest celebration arrived early that year. A warm wind swept across the fields, stirring up gold dust and carrying the scent of cider and cloves. It was the kind of day where even the fences looked brighter, and grudges felt tired. People gathered in the town square, boots tapping, dresses swaying, voices rising in soft chatter. Lanterns hung from posts like sleepy fireflies waiting for dusk. The church bell hadn't struck yet, but the dance floor was already alive with fiddles and footfalls. She didn't plan to attend. Not at first. She had baked a pie, apple with cinnamon, intending to send it with the children. But Ruth had insisted she come. "You're part of us now," the girl said, her hand warm on the woman's wrist. "Everyone needs to see." She smoothed her apron, then her hair, then folded the ribbon he'd given her months ago into her pocket like a lucky charm. When she stepped outside, the air caught in her lungs. Not from cold, from the sight of them all waiting. And the boy, Ruth, all dressed in their best. The boy nodded at her. Not a smile, but his eyes were proud. The widower stepped forward, offered his arm. She hesitated only a second before placing her hand on his sleeve. The walk into town felt like something sacred. Not a parade, not a performance. A procession. The wind tugged at her shawl. She held it tighter, remembering when it had been stained and torn. Now, stitched and whole. As they reached the square, heads turned. It wasn't cruelty anymore. It was surprise. Curiosity. A kind of silent recognition that something had changed and they'd all missed when it had happened. The preacher's wife blinked twice before nodding. The butcher stepped aside to let them pass. Even Miss Hetty, standing near the cider barrel, mouthed the words, "It's about time." The fiddler played louder. Boots stamped the wooden floor. But no one invited her to dance. Not yet. So she stood at the edge, hands folded, children laughing nearby. Her shawl caught the lantern light. The scent of apples and wood smoke wrapped around her. He was speaking with a neighbor, something about hay or fence posts, but he kept glancing back toward her, eyes unreadable. She turned away, unsure, her fingers tightening. That's when the boy approached. He didn't speak, just reached out a hand. She stared at him. He said, "You fixed everything." Tears caught in her throat, but she swallowed them. He led her onto the floor. Others parted, some watching, some pretending not to. They didn't dance fast. Just a sway, a small step. But his little hand in hers was enough. Then Ruth joined, wrapping herself around her waist. And finally, the widower came forward. He didn't ask. He just held out both arms. And she stepped into them. The music shifted. Slower. Softer. Their bodies moved as if they'd always known this rhythm. "You're glowing," he whispered. "I'm terrified." "So am I," he said. "But I'd rather be terrified beside you than brave alone." They moved in a quiet circle, under stars and lanterns, under the eyes of a town that had once turned away and now had no choice but to look. "You've never asked me to stay," she said. "I didn't know how." "You still haven't." He stopped. Right there, in the middle of the dance floor, he stopped. The music faded. He turned to her, one hand still on her waist, the other reaching for her fingers. "Then let me say it plain," he said, voice steady, eyes wet. "I want you beside me, all the days I've got left. You already gave me back my children. Let me give you a home." Her breath caught. The lanterns flickered. The crowd watched, silent now. She nodded once. And he kissed her. Not long. Not showy. Just enough for her knees to buckle a little, and for Ruth to squeal with delight, and for the boy to look down and hide his grin. Later, after the pie contest and the fiddle duel, they sat beneath the sycamore tree where she had once been left standing alone. This time, there was a quilt, and cider, and laughter. The children rested against her. He placed a ring in her palm. Not new. His late wife's. "She'd want you to have it," he said. She stared at it, then closed his hand around it. "No," she said gently. "That belongs to memory." He frowned. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the ribbon. Pale green, frayed at one end. "Tie this around my finger," she said. "For now." He did. The children watched, wide-eyed. And then, without cue, the boy leaned into her shoulder. Ruth called her Mama, loud enough for the town to hear. And the wind rustled the trees like applause. When night came fully, and the stars spilled across the sky like scattered prayers, they returned home together. Not as guests. Not as almosts. As a family. She lit the last candle in the house, the one by the windowsill, and set the carved wooden horse beside it. The children yawned. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders. And for the first time in a long while, there was no whisper in the dark, no fear at the edge of quiet. Only the warmth of being seen, the safety of being chosen, and the peace of finally belonging. So if the world ever tells you that your worth comes from what you can give, a child, a title, a legacy, remember the woman who was turned away at the train station and still made a home shine brighter than any chapel. If you've been told you're too late, too empty, too much, too different, remember this. Some families are built not by blood, but by bravery. And sometimes, the ones they call unworthy become the ones everyone calls Mama. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.